My name is Len Chuba. I'm the coordinator for these webinar, Lunch and Learn webinar series presentations. And John was gracious enough to agree to be our presenter for this month. We typically hold these every 2 months. The last one was in June, and it was a technical presentation um, by um, by a friend from a company that makes biopolymers. And this time we're doing a non-polymer, non-technical talk on communication. So let me introduce our speaker, John Scarbadonis. He was responsible for technical marketing and electronics industry in the Americas before retiring from Covestro, where his tenure goes back 35 years, even before it spun out from General Electric in polycarbonates. He was with Bayer before that, so his career in polymers is 35 years, and I have to venture to say that he will not leave our field while he's in his new career. He's enjoys public speaking, refers to himself as a scientific storyteller. He's been fascinated by the rapid evolution in technology and focuses on materials, processes which empower this evolution. He's interested in circularity, which of course is a big hot topic in our industry these days, and maximizing resource utilization. He's a board member of SPE's Plastic Pittsburgh section and where he lives, and he is also a member of the National Speakers Association, a distinguished Toastmaster, and a member of IDSA, Industrial Design Society of America. So, John, let me offer you the floor.
Thank you very much, Len. And I hope that wasn't too much information in my bio. As an old guy, I've done a lot of things. So good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, wherever you're at. Let's talk about storytelling. Now, if you hadn't guessed from my last name, I'm originally from Greece. So I could talk with you today about that most famous storyteller from the ancient world, Homer. Not Homer Simpson, the Homer who gave us the Iliad and the Odyssey about 750 BC. These were epic tales. They were told out loud for hours at a time, and they were spellbinding enough that we're still talking about them 28 centuries later. Anyone watch the movie, by the way? Anyone? I'm going to skip on Homer. If you hadn't noticed it, there's a pin on my lapel, and it's my alma mater, Case Western Reserve University. There's a story behind that too. It's a story about a fork in the road where I came to the US to get my bachelor's degree. I never made it back to Greece. And somehow I'm sitting here in front of you today, several decades later, talking with you about scientific storytelling. Again, I'm going to pass on that because I don't want to talk about ancient poets or my personal journey. I want to talk about storytelling where you live in a professional setting in the 21st century. If you were to look me up on LinkedIn, that most professional networking platform with about 1 billion users, as Len mentioned, you would see my descriptor that reads scientific storyteller. And before you presume that I was chasing the 2025 buzz, where all of a sudden storytelling became a fancy way of saying, I'm a good communicator, I was actually using that descriptor since 2017. Here's how it all started. As Len said, I retired from Covestro last year. And Covestro, if you didn't know, was Bayer Material Science, the largest polycarbonate producer in the world. While I was there, I had a variety of roles. Prior to technical marketing, I was actually doing marketing communications, and specifically marketing communications for the healthcare industry on a global scale. Along the way, I discovered something really interesting. The way to get inside people's head was not to lead with the engineering properties and the iterative product improvements, and the vast library of colors that our plastics came in. Yes, engineered cared about those things. And yes, we made sure that they had access to all that information. But if you wanted to get the marketers, the procurement specialists, the average person on the street won over, we needed stories, stories about what our materials make possible. So I wanted to throw this slide up there because the most imaginative companies on earth all start at the very same place with the same two words. Pixar, IBM, Nike. What if? What if a toy had feelings? That's Toy Story. What if a computer could outthink a chess grandmaster? That's Deep Blue. What if the materials that Nike needs are already sitting in the shoes that we're throwing away? What if is where a story begins, and it's also where a product begins as well. Every self-driving car and medical device story that I ever told started as somebody's what if. So that's what today's talk is all about. How to make your science resonate, starting with what if and ending with people who care. Oh, and how not to lose the room along the way. Now let's start with why it goes wrong, because it goes wrong in a very specific, very forgivable reason. It's called the curse of knowledge. You see, once you deeply know something, it's almost impossible to remember what it's like not to know it. Everything obvious to you feels like it must be obvious to everyone else. So you skip over the part of why this matters. Because to you, it isn't a question. It's like the air you breathe. And we have a second habit that's working against us, our training. Every paper we have ever written follows the same skeleton: methods, results, discussion. You build your evidence brick by brick, and then you deliver the conclusion at the end. Now, that structure is perfect for a journal where a reviewer is actually paid to get to the end. Your audience is not. When you lead with methods and results, with those engineering properties and the library of colors that I mentioned earlier, you're actually handing people the answer before you've told them what the problem is or what the question is. You're pouring concrete before anyone knows what you're building, and the moment you treat a room full of humans like a peer reviewer, you've lost them. So here's my entire talk in 4 words. Relevance first, evidence second. Before you explain your data, explain why it matters. Connect the work to the decisions, the challenges, the opportunities that the people in front of you are actually facing. Relevance earns you the right to be heard. Evidence is what you do once you've earned it. Get those in the wrong order, and the best data in the world can land on empty chairs. Not cool. Now, I'm a scientist, so by training, that is, so I can't just tell you to do something because it sounds nice. Here's why it works. Your audience's brain is asking 2 questions in a fixed order. First, what marketers call WIFM. What's in it for me? Or put another way, do I care about this? Only if the answer is yes, does the brain bother with a second question, which is this true? Now, attention is a gate, and relevance that I mentioned earlier is the key. If you don't open the what's in it for me gate first, all your gorgeous evidence is basically stacking on the wrong side of a locked door. Here's the chemical structure. There is actually a chemical mechanism underneath all of this. When a story grabs a room, you're literally raising the dopamine in it. And if you didn't know, dopamine is the pleasure hormone. It's the same thing behind wanting one more chocolate or one more episode of the show that you're binging. Dopamine also sharpens focus and drives us to think, to plan, to strive. So a good story doesn't just inform, it chemically primes people to lean in. They want more. You don't need to be a neuroscientist to trigger it either. You just need to make people ask the four most powerful words in storytelling. And then what happened? Children ask it out loud. If you pause a bedtime story, grown-ups actually ask it silently at the end of every chapter. When the room is quietly asking those four words, that's the signal that the dopamine released is doing its job, and those folks care. So that's the whole game underneath the science. We remember what we feel. A number attached to consequences gets tagged and stored. A number floating in space, that gets forgotten. So relevance isn't the sugar that helps the medicine go down. Relevance is actually the reason anyone opens their mouth. Here's a secret that really isn't a secret. Every story that ever held a room, every myth, every movie, every one of Homer's epics runs on the same three beats. Introduce a hero, put the hero through a failure, bring them to victory. That's it. Thousands of years of storytelling, three moves. And here's the good news. Your work already has all three. You've just been trained to hide them. So introduce your hero. This is the twist that most of us get wrong. The hero is not you, and it's not your data. It's whoever the audience is rooting for. The engineer trying to get a device to market. The patient who's on the other end of that device. Even the material itself, which is asked to survive things that no material should have to survive. Make the room care about somebody or something, and they will follow you. 2, failure. This is the part we're tempted to skip because who wants to dwell on what didn't work? But the failure is the engine of the story, the cracked component, the extractable that nobody could explain, the deadline that nobody could meet. Don't rush past the struggle because the room feels that. If there's no failure, there's no stakes. If there's no stakes, there's no story. And then the 3, the victory. This is where your data actually walks onto the stage, and it actually means something because the room has felt the problem that your data solves. This is where your data lives, not as a wall of evidence, but as a moment that the hero wins. These are the same numbers you always had, but now they're a rescue. They're not a readout. Hero, failure, victory. Get those 3 in that order, and you're telling a story. Leave them out, you're giving a report. So how do you actually do this? I'm going to talk about 5 tools, and you can use every one of them on your very next talk. No rehearsal required. Number 1, before you build a single slide, answer one question. If this work succeeds, who's better off and how? That answer, not your title, not your method, that answer is your first sentence. I imagine the sharpest person in the room leaning back, arms crossed, and saying, so what? If I don't have a crisp answer, the claim isn't ready. So what is the most useful heckler you will ever have? Invite him to every rehearsal. Tool 2. If you can't say the core of your talk in one plain sentence that a smart person outside your field would understand, you don't have a talk yet. You have a pile of slides that are looking for one. No ands, no semicolons. Here's a way that you might want to visualize this. Let's say you're on a plane. Can you explain to a seatmate on the flight what your talk is about before the drink cart arrives? If you need the whole flight, That's not your message. That's your appendix. Number 3, take that paper skeleton that I mentioned, methods, results, discussion, and flip it. Flip it in the order that humans listen in. Number 1, problem. This is the tension. What's broken? Number 2, the stakes. Why the tension matters to the folks in the room. Number 3, insight. This is your discovery. This is the turn. This is what matters. Number 4, evidence. Now and only now you present the proof and your data shines. And finally, number 5, the ask. What do you want your audience to do? What do you want them to decide or to remember? Notice that your evidence didn't disappear. It didn't even shrink. It just moved to the moment when the audience is hungry for it. Same meal, you just stop serving dessert first. And if this looks familiar, it should, because that's the hero, the failure, and the victory again, just with the seams showing. The problem and the stakes set up your hero and their struggle. The insight and the evidence are the victory. Same story arc, just one level down. This tool is what separates a good technical speaker from a forgettable one. Don't make people do the translation from your numbers to their world. Do it for them. Let's say you reduce the extractables by 40%. To you, that's the result. To the person in the third row, that's just a number floating in space. So you need to finish the thought for them. What does this mean? Fewer surprises in the talks review, for example. One less reason a submission comes back with a deficiency letter. A material that actually clears the safety conversation instead of starting. The number is the evidence. The consequence is the relevance. You hand them both in that order. Now, a talk is not a list. A talk is a line. Everything hangs from a single spine. And you keep coming back and touching it. That same idea, that spine, you pick it, and then every slide either hangs off of that spine or it comes out. When a room drifts, you don't need a louder slide. You don't need a bolder font. You need to reach back and touch that spine again. And here is why this still matters. So that through line becomes the difference between a talk that people follow and a slideshow that people endure. Okay, I've given you a lot. I'm going to give you an example. The structure that I just described gets you most of the way, but a few habits actually carry you the rest of the way. First, the pause. The pause is a really powerful tool. When you land the sentence that matters, stop talking and let it sit. The silence tells the room, this one counts. Just like that. The you pivot. Count how many times you say, I found, my data, we showed, versus you, your work, your decision. Tilt the balance towards them. People lean in more when the talk is about them. The third part, the contrast. The ear loves a before and an after. Without this, here's your headache. With it, here's the Tuesday you want. Contrast makes the value impossible to miss. And finally, don't bury the lead. Tell them where you're going before you go. I've got one finding, and it's going to change how you spec this material. Let me tell you, that's a signpost. Curiosity is a gift. Suspense is a gamble. Now I'm going to give you the example I was talking about prior. It was December of 2019, just before COVID totally turned our world around. I got a new boss. She came in from fast-moving consumer goods. She knew a little bit about plastics and frankly was curious, maybe even suspicious about the scientific storyteller description. So she challenged me. Tell me a story about one of your products. I could have opened with properties, with values, with that color library that I mentioned. Instead, I told her about thermally conductive polycarbonate, TCPC, a material that molds like plastic but radiates heat like metal. And I told it as a story. The engineers at Ford used it in the rear housing assembly of the F-150 fog lamp. It passed every torture test that they could devise. It came in at half the weight of the steel housing it was replacing, and it handed Ford a significant reduction in assembled part cost. The story took 90 seconds. By the end, that brand new boss, who was plastic skeptical, was smiling and nodding. Same facts that the specs would have provided, but wrapped in a problem, a hero, a win. So they stuck. 90 seconds. That's all relevance first costs you. And it scales. It scales beyond that. Lately, I've been telling stories about circular design, about a world that's getting tired of devices that die on schedule. Some people call this planned obsolescence. And what changes when the device is designed for repair or for upgrade and for easy disassembly at the end of its life. Same move. You start with what the audience already feels, and then you bring in the material science as the thing that makes the better ending possible. Storytelling asks that you get inside your audience's head. It asks that you understand what they truly care about and to speak to it. You need to describe the challenge honestly. You need to talk about failures even. And then you introduce the hero, the solution that overcomes the challenge and saves the day. Do that and your message will resonate. People will remember your solution, not because of the data alone, but because of how you made them feel. Now we have a 30-second video. Teresa, if you can line that up. This is the same idea, but this is how I pitched it to a group of professionals who are not scientists. Do I have to stop sharing?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
If you want to be a storyteller, you need to get inside your audience's head. You need to figure out what they care about, and you need to speak to it. You need to talk about the challenges. You need to talk potentially about failures, and then you introduce the hero, the solution that comes in, overcomes the challenges, and saves the day. This type of story sticks inside your audience's mind because of how you make them feel.
Yeah, there's a lot of hand movements there. So let me wrap up. I have to find my slides again. And of course, that's not the slide I wanted. Give me a second. Let me go back and find it. I stopped the presentation mid share, the sharing mid presentation, and it's now trying to tell me that I have to start from scratch. Come on. Come on, where is it? Okay, is it working? Teresa, you're muted.
We see inside your audience's head, John.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, next to last slide. So here's my challenge to you. Whatever you're working on, your next paper, your next pitch, the next 15 minutes in front of an audience like this, craft your next story carefully and make sure that the humans in the room find it impactful. Remember, relevance first, evidence second. Thank you.
Everybody's muted, so you could only hear me, John.
That's
But we
okay.
all appreciate it.
I I'm leaving it up on this slide. My message to people is, if you want to get in touch, LinkedIn is where I'm at. Easy to find there.
Well, let's take advantage of the next half hour, which we've scheduled a 1 hour meeting. So the next 30 minutes are for Q&A and for open discussion and networking. So you could either put your question into the chat box or just raise your hand and I'll try to recognize you as soon as I see you. All right. Well, we're about top of the hour, so I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and especially thank you, John, for giving us this very fascinating presentation. It has merit for pretty much anybody in any area of occupation in society, including those going through school, because even the kids these days are asked to give presentations. And what I've noticed is we start them young and they do better.